Hey, so I wanted to talk about the cross right now. I just talked about angelology, but I want to jump to the cross, and that might seem like a vast jump to you, but actually, to me, you know, the cross is just as cosmic as the angels, more cosmic. So a lot of people get confused about the cross, and I'm actually tagging onto this atonement theory. So atonement theory is the study of the sacrificial covering of Jesus of sin. And a lot of people, they get caught up in the cross and atonement theory, and they say, what even is this? They say, I know this is true. I know it's important. I know it buys me forgiveness of sins, but I don't understand it. Which is quite reasonable, actually. Because it is a mysterious thing that's how Yahweh saved humanity. The cross. But, the apostles acknowledge that. So Paul says the cross is actually foolishness to humanity. But it's the wisdom of God. And part of that is God saying, you don't really understand the truth of your own circumstances. He chose something that seems silly because the whole human project is silly. When rebelling against God is a name, it's pointless. Like, why would you rebel against God? There's no reason for it. Absolutely no reason for it. So part of the reason he chose a cross to save humanity is it's a satire of humans. And God watches us very closely, extremely closely, so he knows what we're like. And he satirized us. So that's part of what the cross is. It's a divine satire of humans. And I think humans realize how cool it is and how honest it is, and that's part of the reason they just can't stop talking about that thing. Everybody wants to think it's true. Well, it is. Good news. It is true. All right, so I'm just going to focus in on the story itself to show you kind of what's going on there. And there's so many threads going in through the cross. How would I put this? Chaos in my house. Kids are always knocking stuff over, something over, something. But one of the things about a cross, or the cross, I think part of it is he's kind of unplugging reality out of one particular central processing unit, and he's plugging it into another one. So if you want to think about it in programming terms, it's almost like it's the engine of the universe. The engine of the fallen universe is a tree. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So what he does is he unplugs it and he replugs it in a new tree, the cross, right? The tree of life. So humans had revolted against him. They rejected the life tree. They chose the death tree. All of this reality is based on that particular tree. He uses the cross to unplug and replug. It's a new CPU. And actually, you can open up a computer and put a new CPU in it. It's kind of a funny thing, right? Can be a real pain in the butt if you've ever done it, but you can do it, right? You can swap them out. And the funny thing about CPUs is you don't even have to update the hardware or the software or anything. You just slap it in there. The firmware is on the motherboard. So it's pretty easy to actually swap a CPU. It's actually kind of great. It's just getting the hardware swapped out can be a pain. And you want to make sure you do it right. Because if you don't put that cooling gel on it, I'm going off into a tangent. But that's something you can liken it to. It's like the engine. Right? The cross is like the engine of reality. It's what's going to drive the next stage. Okay, so let's break that down. Story of the cross, right? So Jesus' triumphal entry, he enters into Jerusalem as a conquering king, but he rides a donkey, right? He rides a donkey. He rides on an ass. How funny is that? Kings ride on horses. The king of the universe came on an ass. And if you study asses are not typically your chief cavalry, animal, right? Because it's actually kind of funny. Absalom rode a donkey into battle, right? So you can do it, but usually kings prefer horses. He comes on a donkey, which is more of a domestic animal, right? You typically use donkeys for domestic travels. I think typically the donkey was the horse of the poor man. They were less expensive because they're not quite as glamorous as horses. Horses were more like Ferraris. I think donkeys were more like your Pinto of the ancient world. Not like a great car in a lot of ways. And he rides on a young donkey, right? So like he picks the animal nobody else would pick, and that's what he rides into Jerusalem on. He's welcomed as a king, right? They expect him to come in and declare to be king of Israel and to start conquering the Romans, because clearly Jesus could have done it. Everybody's expecting it. And instead, he goes right to the temple and he sacks the temple, right? He drives all the usury and stuff out of the temple. So he cleanses the court of the Gentiles. And he's telling them, this is my ministry. My ministry is the court of the Gentiles. I'm going to spread the righteousness of Yahweh to the nations. So he states very overtly what his ministry is. He states it explicitly. And in the first half of that week, he battles against Israel. They think he's going to war against the Romans. He wars against the Israelites. And he wins. He conquers the scribes, he conquers the Sadducees, he conquers the Pharisees, and it's the peasants who receive him, but the kings of the Jews are defeated, right? And they are so pissed off about this, right, that I think they take a two-pronged attack. On one side, they want to get rid of Yeshua because he's being a real pest, and on the other side, they want to force him to do what they want him to do. Conquer the Romans for us, Yeshua, for crying out loud. Just do it. That's what we want. Isn't that what you're here for? You're the Messiah. And I think on one level they realized who he was. I don't think you could encounter Yeshua after he was inaugurated as the Messiah and not realize there was something very different about the guy. I really do think that's true. You could not encounter Jesus without going, something different about that guy. Something different. And actually, you study his interaction with Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate very clearly felt that way about Jesus. He was like, I really want to just get rid of this guy. He is terrifying. Get away from me. So you see this tension with Jesus, right? People are drawn to him, but they're also repulsed by him at the same time. And so there's a two-pronged approach in what the Jews are doing, right? And it's interesting, right? Caiaphas realizes this, right? He says it in John. He says, we should just kill the guy or else the Romans are going to destroy us. So they see him as somebody who would be a very powerful ally, but also a very powerful enemy, right? So what's the easiest way to fix this? Get rid of him. And this is a subtle dig on how human religion operates. So yes, the Israelites were God's chosen people, but from God's perspective, what they had done is they had traded the glory of his truth and basically converted it into a Gentile religion. It's not to say they weren't doing Torah, but they did it with the spirit of Gentiles and not with the spirit of love that he wanted. And this is a constant critique throughout the Old Testament, and they were doing it even when Jesus showed up, even worse than they'd ever been doing it. So when Yeshua shows up, he's pretty ticked about this. But actually, if you met a Pharisee, good guy, nice guy, wise guy, knowledgeable guy, he knew Torah, could talk to you about it. And actually, people think the Pharisees and the Sadducees were so cruel reading the Bible. That's God's perspective of them. They're actually, if you met them on a human level, they weren't bad guys. And even now, if you hang out with a rabbi, is a rabbi a bad guy? I think typically they're pretty nice, knowledgeable, frequently they're kind of thinking ahead of people, applying religion to everyday life. They're not bad guys, and they weren't then either. That's part of the problem. Yeshua was just wrecking their stuff, and it ticks him off. And that's how every man is, right? He's wrecking their stuff. This 30-year-old upstart comes in and overturns the temple. And they're like, why are you doing this to us, Yeshua? You're one of us. Actually, from a human perspective, that's a good point. So notice, if you read the Gospels from an honest human perspective, Jesus does come off as a little bit harsh. A lot of bit harsh. And you can understand why the Jews are saying what they're saying to him. What the heck, Yeshua? Right? So he takes the true human religion, right? Yahweh's cultus, the best of the best, which had been corrupted, and he critiques it massively. And he overturns their temples, and he cleanses it, and he basically tells them right then, I'm cleansing this place for the Gentiles. They're going to have the temple for a while. He's prophesying to them, I'm cleansing the temple. And when he came in and overturned the tables, I'm assuming he shut down sacrifice for a bit for the common people. So he's actually, he's making it so it's harder for them to do their version of Yahweh's religion, which is kind of interesting. He stuck a stick in the spokes. So he's making a statement about what's happening right in front of them, right? Yahweh's mad at you. He wants you to open your hearts up to him and receive what I'm about to do, and you're not doing it. And my coming is not about conquering your enemies. It's about leading people into the cultus of Yahweh, into his temple, so that the doors can be opened to all humans. That's what he's doing. And you see that in the first half of the week. And he has no mercy on the Jews. They come to him, he just slaughters them. And from Monday through Wednesday, you can't beat the guy. He's unstoppable. And notice this is kind of like mirroring creation almost. Kind of interesting, right? Jesus, his Holy Week, I think if you studied it, mirrors creation. So he's also recreating, which is kind of cool. He's recreating the world. Thursday through Saturday, Jesus can't win, right? So Thursday night, he's betrayed. Friday, he's tried. Saturday, he's dead. Sunday, he rises. So on the 8th day, he rises. But if you study that, so he critiques human religion. He encounters Pontius Pilate, right? So the Jews capture him. They false try him against Torah. So they break their own law to beat him, which is what happens to men, right? So they cheated. All of his most ardent human followers, and you know what? Actually, Peter was a pretty ardent guy. He's a pretty strong symbol of masculinity. You can tell that in the Gospels. Peter was no pushover. But what happens when push comes to shove? He runs. He runs. And Yeshua tells him that. You are willing inside, but you're not willing in your flesh. You're a fallen man, Peter. You will abandon me because, you're not going to choose to follow God over the fallen age. And that's why Peter abandons him. He's going to naturally choose the fallen age. So he critiques, the average man, the most righteous of men, right? And actually, Peter was a very righteous man. People judge Peter and the disciples of Jesus, and they say he picks this band of losers. But you know what? I honestly think he picked the losers because the losers have nothing to lose. They're the most honest ones. Losers are more honest. People who have money and power and education can more adequately hide how they really are with eloquence and knowledge and power. But he picked basically peasants for the most part and people everybody hated because they'd listen to him and they have nothing to hide. And so those are the people he picked. And this is a theme throughout Scripture. He goes to the losers because the losers will listen. And even today that's true. And actually, in Yahweh's book, every fallen human is a loser because they are going to lose in the end. So he picks the people who've already realized it. But they abandon him too, right? So the losers abandon him. The best of the best Israel has to offer. Herod, the Jewish king, who's not Jewish, but he is the king of the Jews. He turns on Yeshua. And finally, the best pagan political religious system, right? So the Roman Empire, they abandon him. They abandon him. What should Pontius have done, right? The Romans claim to be just. But instead, Pontius Pilate says, no, I'm not going to help you. And it's funny, the only people who stand by Yeshua are John and the women. Everybody else isn't there as he's dying. John the Apostle and the women. That's pretty much it. So the only people who stand by and watch him die are this very small band of people. This very small band of people the world has rejected, right? Women, and I kind of get the impression John was kind of this nerdy, introspective guy, right? The disciple whom Jesus loved, right? So only them. And everybody else leaves him dying on the cross. And even John doesn't intercede to save him, he just watches him die. He doesn't go to the courts and appeal it. He just watches him die. That's the best Jesus got. The best he got was neutrality, right? People just watch him die and then walk away brokenhearted. And if you look at that, and there's a critique of aesthetics, right? So the thing that the Father throws Jesus up on is a hunk of rough-hewn wood. Not something beautiful at all, 2 boards, 4 right angles, and a plaque. Crown of thorns, nails in his body. That's it. The aesthetics of it are ugly. It's dark, it's raining. The justice. So if you actually look at it, what's interesting is every aspect of human existence gets critiqued. Our politics, our religion, our family structures, our friendships, our military apparatus. Everything we claim is so good collapses under the weight of the righteousness of Jesus Christ. But what also is interesting about all this is in the middle of it is this love story between the Son and the Father. And this is a story that keeps coming up throughout the Old Testament. Yahweh is just looking for somebody to love him no matter what. And Job does it, right? Abraham does it. There are people who do it, but so few do. And finally, he incarnates Yeshua. And Yeshua was his son who never abandoned him. And so many of the beings of heaven did abandon him, but his son never did. But at long last, the Father even gives him a reason to abandon Yahweh. And it's funny, all these other beings had no reason to do it. But at this moment, Yeshua has a reason to abandon Yahweh. What reason did Adam and Eve have to abandon God? None. Lucifer? None. The top angels? None. None of these people had a reason to do it. But now Yahweh has created a scenario that is so ugly, that is so despicable, that is so hateful intrinsically, that Yeshua should abandon the Father. And he even turns his back on the Son, right? In this mystery, the Father abandons the Son as he's on the cross. Yeshua acknowledges it. But then he, at long last, as he is dying, he says, I commit my spirit into your hands, Dad. I trust you no matter what, and I still love you. And it's completed. And he says it's finished. It's perfected. And notice Yahweh doesn't say that when he creates. He says it's very good. But what does Yeshua say on a broken tree? I finished it, Dad. The creation is done. It's done. I finished it. We finished the creation, Dad. And that tells you what was the one thing Yahweh was waiting on. Love. That's the perfection. Love. He was waiting on people to unconditionally love him. And it turned into unconditional hate. They finished it. It was all about love. That's what he was waiting on. Unconditional love. Infinite love. And Jesus gave it to him. And the age closed that day. And that was the end of the world, technically. The new age dawned on that day. And what's cool about love is it's integrating by nature. It's the substance of reality. So when Jesus gave an infinitude of love to Yahweh and to humanity, the new age dawned. That was the beginning of the next age. And he ushered in the next era. And all things that had been broken were restored. The curse was lifted on anybody who chose to follow Yahweh from that moment on. And no longer were death sacrifices needed. Jesus was the last death sacrifice, right? After that, it was only life sacrifices, offering up our life to Yahweh. That's it. And communion in the church is a sacrifice, but it's not a fallen sacrifice. We offer up our love to Yahweh through the life of his Son. It's all based in life. So a new age dawned and a new life was given to humanity. And now Israel lives through life, not through death. In the Old Testament, they were still attached to death. Now we all live through life if we choose to follow Jesus. And that's the incredible thing about that cross story, right? He uses a joke to start the new age. And the center of reality becomes that cross. It's the center of all existence is that cross. And in the next age, the center of the universe will be the reality Jesus inaugurated through his death and resurrection. And that's why in the Gospel of John, Jesus rises on the 8th day. On the 8th day, he came back to life. The week of 7 wasn't finished. Yahweh hadn't finished it yet. He hadn't finished it. Jesus did. It was a father-son gig, right? And the son finished it for the father. And he showed us how to exist in the midst of that. And he radically revealed to humans how utterly messed up we are. We're just gross. And we mask it. And Freud was right. We all live in our id. If we don't have the Holy Spirit, we live in our gut. It's about stuff. It's not about God. But Yeshua, the reason we love that story so much is he chose to love beyond the stuff. He loved beyond the crap. He just loved to love. He loved to love. And it's a mystery why that cross covers sin. I mean, why it covers sin, we don't fully understand. But I think it has to do with the fact that in, how would I put it? The infinity of his existence as God, right? He went into the infinity of death and he canceled it. He nullified death through his life by laying it down. And I think the Bible actually does teach this. There's a certain kind of balance God built into reality. Right? He built a balance into reality. So quid pro quo, right? This for that. I always think of The Hangover when I say that, but quid pro quo, right? So he built a balance in reality, right? Tit for tat, tooth for tooth, eye for eye. And in a death state where everything is regulated based on hate because we're dead, things have to be regulated through death because we've chosen death. But Jesus defeated death. He swallowed death up. And in doing that, he destroyed sin. He covered it over with life. It's mysterious how that all works, but he destroyed death. He reconnected all of reality around his love, and then he distributes that through the Holy Spirit. And whenever somebody comes and receives the gift of the Holy Spirit, death and sin is annihilated in their life in a hidden way, but it's removed. And the curse is lifted, and they re-enter Eden. Again, all of this is quite mysterious, but and part of this I have to say is you cannot stop talking about the cross. It's the funny thing. It was God's Swiss Army knife. He got so much done with that torture device. So much done. And that's the funny thing about God. He can just do whatever he wants down here, and he does. When he wants to get something done, he just gets it done. And he used the truth about fallen humans, which is we're hateful and we hide things and we destroy things to get our way, to bring life back into this earth. And now anybody can have it. All you have to do is repent and turn to Yeshua, right? Turn to Jesus, repent, and he welcomes all back into the kingdom of his Father with open arms. Anybody can enter through that gate whenever they want to. Whenever you want to, you can go right through that gate. You don't have to stick around for this crap anymore. Yeah, you might be scared of coronavirus or whatever's out there, but you can walk right through that gate. You don't have to be afraid of it anymore. You don't have to. You can walk through that gate. You can. And that's the atonement. From death to life, right? He used his eternal life to defeat death, which is an eternal death, right? He nullified it because death is nothing, right? And when he confronted it head on, he wiped it out, right? And he used his infinite goodness, right, to consume our infinite evil. And he covered it over. And how that works, I don't totally understand, but that's what he did. But I have a word for this that is not in the Bible, but it's just a way I've attempted to explain what the Bible's talking about with all this sacrifice and stuff. But I think there's a principle in reality called resonance. God made this particular age dyadic. It's based in sets of two. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it's based in sets of two, which is love, right? The next stage I think will be quite different, but in this age it's dyadic. And so reality was designed to resonate within itself into life through love, right? So love is a life-giving resonance between beings, where they mutually encounter each other, and in their two lives, they discover each other and themselves, and it leads to further growth and further life. But resonance continued into the death age. So in the death age, the resonance became hate. And so in this age, people, if they don't know Jesus Christ, it's not that there isn't a form of love in this age, don't hear me saying that, but it always leads towards death and hate. And how quickly does our love collapse? We're like dying stars. We just implode. And so resonance it's this thing in reality that things are supposed to be interconnected. It's supposed to be. But we can't be. We turn on each other so quickly. And so Yeshua, he dives into that death resonance and reconnects it to life. And so in a lot of ways, Jesus on that cross, it's the new creation. You're watching it. And whenever you look at a picture of Jesus on that cross, it's happening. That's the recreation. It's the new age. He created it. And that's why, Rome couldn't get rid of these Christian people, because the life is so much more powerful than death. You can't get rid of it. You can't. It's so indomitable. Death is just so weak. It's a joke. People think, death is so cool or whatever. It's a joke. It's a joke. All of this world is a joke. So that's about all I'm going to say right now on that. But if I had to summarize it, they say it best around here, cross equals love. But so often, because we're based in hate, we interpret love to mean leave me alone and let me do what I want. That's really what it is. And that's actually hate. That's hate. But it is love. But love in God's perspective is about life leading to life. It's about infinite valuation of other to the point of death. And that's what Yeshua did for us. He infinitely valued us to the point of death, even though he should have just flipped us the bird and left, which he said he could have done. But he doesn't. He doesn't. And now that's our model of existence. Sacrificial, self-effacing valuation of other. It's even economics. There's so much going on in that tree. So it's the tree of life. It's the tree of life. He re-embodied that tree in the middle of time. He recreated it. That cross was the tree of life. Which is really ironic when you think about it. Because the original tree of life was just so deadgum beautiful and delicious. That thing was incredible. The fact that humans rejected it is just mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. It was an amazing tree. And that's something people don't realize about that story. The tree of life was incredible, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was just gross. Just gross. It's nasty. I'm pretty sure it was just red delicious. That's my theory of that tree. Red delicious apples. But the funny thing is, I was talking to Allie about this. It's the funny thing about those stinking, disgusting apples is you find them everywhere. I feel like throughout my whole life, I cannot escape red delicious apples. As much as I might try, as much as I might hate those disgusting, leathery, mealy, bitter apples, I can't get rid of them. They're everywhere. And I have this theory that I have not tested out. If you went to just about anybody on the street and said, could I have a red delicious apple? They would say, hang on, I've got one in my car. Suddenly you would have a red delicious apple in your hand. They're everywhere, right? Those things are everywhere. It's hysterical. We even had, Johnny Appleseed in this country just went around planting them. It's just oh, why? Why? But, there you go. Okay, I'm going to shut up. If you have any other questions about that, email me. You can never talk enough about Jesus and the cross. So, All right, well, let me know if, like I said, if you have anything else. All right, thanks, bye.